Okay. With the arrival of, now that we have met quorum, I will call this meeting to order at 7:33 p.m. The initial part of this meeting is a public hearing. Will last 15 minutes to discuss the proposed charter amendment resolution 2024-CR-01 regarding elections. As public comment, then we are here to listen to members of the public and we can try to answer some questions, but the idea is to allow as much time as needed for members of the public to comment on this. The summary of the changes is shown on the screen. The amendment will modify the timetable for persons to file a petition for candidacy for town elections, authorize and provide for early voting in town elections if the council decides to do so, and generally relate to the conduct and management of municipal elections in the town of Riverdale Park. And with that brief introduction, are there any members of the public who would like to comment on the proposed charter amendment, resolution 2024-CR-01? Okay, well, we will wait. I will announce a few more times before the end of the planned time for this public hearing, which lasts till 7:45 p.m. See if anyone would like to ask questions or make comments on this charter amendment.
Do have a question, uh, not related to this particular matter.
Okay, well, the general general place for that is will be in the main meeting. There'll be a section for public comments. We are trying to focus on the charter amendment during this time, just in case we don't want anyone to be dissuaded from speaking because we're having a big discussion about something else. And so generally the public hearing is when we try to focus entirely on the topic of the public hearing.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Mayor, this is Sarah Zolad. I'm the chair of the board of the Town Board of Elections, and I wanted to speak up in support of this amendment. The Board of Elections has done a great deal of work over the last maybe 10 months with the help of Jessica on coming up with what we believe are some really necessary changes to our current charter and codes that will make the elections much more easy for the volunteers to run and flexible and resilient as the changes we see happening in the election landscape continue, and with the town growing as well. We are happy to answer any questions that anyone has. The goal of this legislation or this change is to encourage more participation by town members in the election process and to invigorate the town.
Thank you, Ms. Zolette. I appreciate those remarks. Are there any additional comments, questions on the proposed charter amendment that will modify mostly modify election timetables and allow for early voting? So that amendment, we can go through it if anyone would like to. It's been available in various places for people to look at for at least a week or so, the draft of it. And I think it was introduced at the October legislative meeting. So I guess it's closer to a month than a week. And copies can be provided after this hearing to anyone who wishes one. Available on the town's website, of course. Ms. Kronk, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor Thompson, and good to be with everyone on the council tonight. Would love to hear any comments from the public who are not part of the Board of Elections, but wanted to just weigh in as a member of the Riverdale Park Board of Elections and just echo everything that Sarah said. The board not only has been working on a full review of all of our processes and procedures and timelines to make them as accessible and fair as possible. But we also did a good bit of work to compare those processes to other municipalities in the area to make sure that we were improving processes and timelines where there were opportunities to. And also making sure that we weren't, out of line with the norms from surrounding municipalities. So we're excited about this potential change. Wanted to speak up in favor of it. Hope that the council will support it and help move it forward. And we're excited to also be able to dig in to the process as we head toward the 2025 municipal election season. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Kronk, and thank you for your work. All the members of the Board of Elections who are here this evening. Thank you for your work and the work of staff to bring this before us. We have still 5 minutes in the public hearing to discuss CR 2024-01, a amendment to the town's charter that would alter the timetable for filing of petitions to be included on the ballot, and will also allow for early elections should the town council decide to do so, and generally to the conduct and management of municipal elections. So any comments from members of the public on this charter amendment? The main thing it will do is it will have people knocking on your door and asking for signatures a bit earlier than has been true in the past. Might be that on Valentine's Day, shortly after Valentine's Day, you'll be hearing a lot of knocks on your doors and people holding out a pen and a petition and asking for you to sign it. Anyone who wishes to speak can raise their hand, can unmute their microphone, and can make comments on this.
Well, at the risk of breaking the silence, which is pretty deafening, we believe on the Board of Elections that this is a tremendous step forward for the town. And we are very grateful to this town to be populated with people who do not want to make mischief with elections, but want to improve the process for the people who live here. And we think that it's very important that we try to be as inclusive and available as possible to everybody.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Kelly. I appreciate them. And I appreciate, as I said, your work to bring this before us and all of the activities that you've done for many years as in helping elections run smoothly in the town. Okay, we have about 2 minutes. Excuse me, about 2 minutes left in the public hearing, and then we will wrap up. So anyone who's been holding back and is shyly waiting for an opportunity to step up, please step up now. Be happy to hear your comments. Ms. Doyen, please speak.
Hi, at the risk of a little overkill from the board, um, I will just to echo all the comments of my fellow board members. And also to add that, we really think that another reason why these changes are important is because it will, like the inclusiveness that we talked about, I think it will help facilitate getting the word out about the election more, and will involve more people, and even involve more people running. So yeah, just to echo the rest of my board members, there's so many reasons why we feel this is important and is going to be a framework for when the town grows more.
Thank you very much, Ms. Doyen. Appreciate your comments and also your work on the board. Appreciate that very much. So we have reached the nominal end of the public hearing. So anyone who wishes to speak, members of the public who wish to speak, please do so now, or I will close out the public hearing and start up the legislative meeting. I'll give you 10 more seconds.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Lingua, I will allow you to speak, but usually it's a public hearing. But go ahead.
Well, I say this with the public in mind. I believe at the beginning of this, you said you intended to have a 15-minute public hearing. Is that correct?
The schedule was for 15 minutes. The schedule was from 7:30 to 7:45. I wanted to be sure that we were in that time frame.
All right.
And
We
I know
commenced
we
the
started.
meeting at 7:33.
We started a few minutes late. If there had been members of the public who were waiting to speak, then I would have been happy to extend it. But I don't think that there's a requirement for it to be 15 minutes. I think that we have allowed plenty of time. I don't think anyone left because we started 4 minutes late.
Okay.
If you would like to stay in session for another, let's see, what would that be? 2 minutes and 15 seconds roughly, then we can do that.
Well, as your chair of the meeting, that's your decision.
Okay. Well, I think we've spent enough time. We have a long agenda before us this evening. So I'm going to go ahead at 7:47, declare the end of the public hearing, and then call the legislative meeting into order also at 7:47 p.m. Please all rise as you can for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence or silent prayer as your conscience finds appropriate. And I'm going to take a little bit of extra time in my own moment of silence to send my thoughts and prayers to the families of Sky Sosa and Shalom Imba, as they will be celebrating a sad anniversary later this month of the deaths of their children. Thank you. Please be seated. Members of the council, you have an agenda before you or any changes required to that agenda? There is no correspondence summary, so I would recommend striking the correspondence summary from the agenda. Okay. With that, may I please have a motion to amend to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
moved.
Seconded. Either way, Mayor.
That was, I couldn't even see. It was like the Zoom was flickering back and forth. At least that was Councilmember Inyang, seconded by Councilmember Foe. Is that those the two who were speaking?
Correct.
Okay. So are there any conflicts of interest that any members have for items on the agenda while we are discussing the motion? Are there
I
any
have
public
none.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on the motion to approve the agenda as amended? Hearing none, I will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith is absent. I'll talk about that in my report. Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia is also absent. I have not heard from her, and Councilmember Callan is absent. I have not heard from him. So I will abstain. The motion passes 3-0. That brings us on the agenda to presentations, and the first presentation is from Prince George's County Fire EMS Department, Fire Chief Tiffany Green, Deputy Fire Chief James McKellen, and Assistant Fire Chief Michael White. Chief, please, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and again, thank you for allowing me to speak. Again, my apologies. I'm in transit from a couple other events, but again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today. With me today, as you mentioned earlier, is Deputy Chief Jimmy McClellan. He'll speak in a little bit. He's our Emergency Operations Deputy, as well as Assistant Fire Chief Michael White, who manages our Volunteer Services Office. Both will be presenting today. Before you use the PowerPoint, I'll let Chief White go ahead and kind of give an overview of our fire services on the volunteer side in that particular area. Then Chief McClellan will talk a little bit about our staffing and our operational plan and how we manage service coverage to that area. And hopefully, given my Wi-Fi, I'll be able to answer the additional questions that you guys have in the end. If not, Chief McClellan will take the lead on that. I'll let Chief White go. Go ahead, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, my name is Michael White. I'm Assistant Fire Chief, Prince George's County Fire EMS Department, in charge of Volunteer Services Office. Basically, just go through the PowerPoint presentation. If I can get the next slide, please. So this is a quick overview of more focused on the Riverdale Volunteer Fire Department station that's in your town. Currently, they have 16 personnel who are listed on their fit test roster. The fit test roster means that they have taken their annual mass refresher. Basically, allows the member to ride operationally as an operational volunteer here in Prince George's County. Currently, they have 9 members that are unable to ride because they failed to take their annual fit test refresher, which basically leaves 7 personnel, as you can see in the percentage at the bottom. Next slide, please. With focus on Riverdale, on the town of Riverdale Park, we picked the first box area. You'll hear that term. That gives us a good response area directly from the fire station to the immediate area of the fire station, which is box 701 in the town of Riverdale Park. for this calendar year up till the 27th, when this report was completed, there have been 529 calls for service inside the town of Riverdale Park. And as you can tell by the graph, these are the top 3 stations that have run the majority of the calls inside the town. And if you go to the next slide, please, it'll explain what the other means. In the previous slide, it had the other category. This gets you into the next 3 stations. College Park is station 12. Station 844 is Chillum, not Chillimadelphi, Chillum, up on Ridge Road, and station 55, which is Bunker Hill. And they tells you the split of calls. Just to give you a full picture, those are all the stations that have run a call or a number of calls within the town limits. Chief McClellan will talk more about how some of those stations, I know people that are familiar with our station numbers will recognize that some of those stations seem a little far away, but they could have been dispatched in the town for a number of reasons, whether it was for they were in the area, because we dispatch by automatic vehicle locator. So they could have been in the area. We have a couple of shops nearby, so they could have been dispatched from there. Or it was a larger call that required those to be dispatched there. Next slide, please. Today we added the type of calls that you've had in the town. EMS related responses are here. Out of those, the calls that were listed earlier. As you can tell, medical is a large percentage of what we do here in the Fire and EMS department. You can tell by the upper left is the medical locals, which are generally ALS calls for service. We have 106 that have been in the town, and our lower right is our BLS ambulance calls, lower acuity type calls, nosebleeds to a stub toe will be in that category. So there's been a large number of those calls in your township. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is our fire-related calls. At the very bottom of that, if you could slide up just a little bit more, is our rescue calls for accidents, any type of calls that required a suppression and an EMS unit to respond, are generally in our rescue category. To your structure fires or calls for structure fires does not mean we've had 23 structure fires in the town of Riverdale Park, but we've had 23 calls for some type of structure or smoke call or things of that nature of what we dispatch for. Next slide, thank you. As an overall picture for the station, Riverdale, there have been 1,618 calls for service that Station 7 would have been first arriving or first due on. But as you can tell in the chart to the right, they have run 39 of those 1,618 calls, 1,618 calls, which is about 2%. Your higher station that's run the majority of the calls in that area, Station 1, which is Hydesville, up on Bellcrest Road. Next slide, please. Thank you. And next slide answers the other, as indicated earlier, just kind of gives you a broader picture of some of the other stations that have run a lot of the calls that in the Riverdale area, not just in the town, just kind of splits up their calls. Next slide, please. For this calendar year, there have been Station 7 has responded to 243 calls for service total, which is split between the engine and the ambulance. As you can tell, the ambulance has run the majority of the calls the station has responded on this year, but it's 203 calls, and which is roughly 84% of their call volume. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, Station 7 has had a high number of unavailability for service this calendar year thus far. From January 1 to October 27th, when this report was run, out of a possible 7,224 available hours for service to provide service in this calendar year. Station 7 has been out of service roughly 6,627 hours for the engine and 6,300 hours for the ambulance, which means the ambulance has been in service more often than the engine, because the ambulance requires 2 personnel, 2 EMS only personnel, or 2 EMS personnel. May not have had enough people to put the engine in service. But those numbers are, the unavailability for service numbers are pretty high. And working with their leadership to try to see what we can do to help improve that. Next slide, please. This is what you have currently in Station 7. They have 2 engines and 1 ambulance. Unfortunately, the county currently has a reserve ambulance there in the station. But unfortunately, the ambulance that's owned by the Riverdale Volunteer Fire Department had a engine trouble last year, and that unit is still out of service. We're working with the leadership to try to figure out what the next plan for that unit is. As far as I know, the engine was replaced, but there's some other outstanding items that they're working with our apparatus maintenance on to get fixed. Next slide, please. This is our budget for this year for Station 7. Currently, the budget is about $33,000, which is our operating budget for station management. Means that they get a check, it goes into their account, and allows them to spend station money on cable bills, light bills, different things of that nature. I'm sorry, not light bills. Just the county takes care of all the utilities for the station, lights, water, any other utilities that may exist. The county takes care of those bills. There's also, if you could slide up just a touch, thank you. We have small tools, which allows saws, small hand tools to be purchased, different supplies and things for the station, toilet paper, paper towels. There's about $3,000 for uniforms, for volunteer uniforms. Out of those 3 budget line items, nothing has been spent thus far for FY25, which started on July 1. And also, we have an ambulance billing fund for the station. The station has collected $410,000 roughly since ambulance billing began. So that account is still available for their use as they submit and as they see fit. Next slide, please. And I think that should be it. Yep, that's the end of the slide. And I guess Chief McClellan will talk about the operations side. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief White. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time this evening. James McClellan, as mentioned, I'm the Deputy Fire Chief of Emergency Operations for the Prince George's County Fire EMS Department, overseeing 45 operational fire EMS stations, apparatus maintenance, and the Training and Leadership Academy. I want to go over a couple of operational things just so you understand some components of some of the information that was provided to you this evening. If on the slides, if you could go back to slide number 3, that would be great. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So just to explain some things, everybody sees who's coming to our town, who's providing the service. Just seeing the numbers of participation from the Riverdale station, who's coming to our town. Just to say, these companies are all within a battalion. These are the closest fire stations that respond. Obviously, the Hyattsville station at 801 and the Bladensburg Firehouse station 809. And if you go to the next slide, there's a whole ton of fire stations. And that could be overwhelming seeing all these stations come to our area. They come to our town. So the Prince George's County Fire EMS Department manages its resources effectively by utilizing staffing or tracking software where our personnel and our apparatus are. We're monitoring call volume. And we're also using, which was mentioned earlier, was called AVL, which actually is GPS for the vehicles. So all our fire EMS vehicles have this. And we utilize that so that when we actually dispatch a call, we could determine the closest units and send the appropriate closest units to the appropriate call. And depending on the call type determines what we send and so forth. So you see a long list of units going there. We move units. So one of the most common questions we get is that when we see a high call demand in an area, we may move resources from a slower area over to that area to compensate for the call volume. So you may see a unit that you're scratching your head, something's wrong. I'm seeing a unit from Bowie or Capitol Heights or so forth. We move those units into place based on call demand. So they're just not community resources, they're county resources, and we move those around. We have software that allows us to track the call volume daily, and as we see the shifts in call volume and demand, we are moving those resources effectively to make sure we're providing adequate coverage to all our communities within Prince George's County. Obviously, you could see not only is Hyattsville and Bladensburg providing that, and it's important to note those are two stations that are staffed by volunteers. Obviously, the Hyattsville Station 801 is staffed by 6 career personnel Monday through Friday from 7 to 3. And then the volunteers pick it up from 3 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning, and they cover all 24 hours on the weekends. Station 809 is 100% volunteer, 24/7. So they're covering the majority of that. Your other companies that are predominantly running are close stations like College Park Station 812, which we also staff during the day with career folks. And then the evening hours and weekends are staffed 100% with volunteers. Our station's 844, which is Chillum, and that's a unique station because it provides special resource to the community. Paramedic or 844 is one of our paramedic ambulances. The reason I like to highlight that for you is the paramedic engine actually provides a unique opportunity when we have to provide advanced life support care, or what we call ALS. That's obviously cardiac interventions, medications, and so forth. We can actually take the crew, they have the equipment, and they have 2 paramedics on the unit. We can upgrade a basic ambulance when we need ALS services, or we could provide care and enhance that service so that it enhances our ALS capabilities in the community. Obviously, Station 855 is Bunker Hill. I do mention that during the summer, we did reallocate folks from 4 firehouses to offset some of our mandatory callbacks and holdovers that we have seen for over the past few years. Station 855 was one of those stations that we have redeployed the personnel. Based on some of the things we've noticed, we actually move companies over there for a regular basis to cover. So you may see other companies filling in for Company 855, covering that area. We're doing that almost on a regular basis now. So frequently we're moving one of our units from the Chapel Oaks or from another station over there for close to the 24-hour period and so forth. Just want to go back to the call volume. So if you could go to slide 5 for me. Everybody asked what type of calls are we seeing within the community? Just like Chief White mentioned, about 85% of our total responses in Prince George's County are EMS-related incidents. That could get categorized into 2 categories. We call that ALS, Advanced Life Support. It's typically our serious medical emergencies, cardiac strokes, high-profile traumas, stuff like that are considered ALS, where we need paramedics to treat them and they need advanced life support care. Our other ones are BLS, which are basic, are minor in nature, and that call type can be broken down into 2 types. You'll see some call types like BLS 0 and BLS 1. Our BLS 1s we actually respond to. There's some minor injuries that could be important versus our BLS 0s are not urgent type of medical calls. We actually proceed to them. If you stub your toe, things like that nature, low acuity calls, we actually proceed to. So that's important to highlight. If you look at the calls in Riverdale between the 2, obviously the BLS is larger in nature compared to the ALS 1, which is a common thing we see, and so forth. The other ones are different call types, and you'll see some of those other ones that are over here are combination calls we have with the police department. So we're running in combination with our local law enforcement officials to those calls. Lastly, if you go to the other one, slide 6, you'll see the different call types on what we run with our fire trucks and so forth. Obviously, the most common one is your investigation, which is a large group because we have different ones. Not to confuse everyone, people are wondering how many call types do you have? We've about to have 197 calls we have that you can call 911 and your call can be categorized in. That's an awful lot, but then we break them into these categories which you see on the screen. That actually allows us, based on what you give the 911 caller, it allows them to determine the appropriate resources and they dispatch those appropriate resources too. So on the suppression side, your most common types of calls are in your investigations, or which are wires down or smoke in the area, versus your rescue one or minor car accidents where people are not trapped. That's the rescue one, versus you see that one where rescue 7 is a car accident where there would be someone trapped inside. Very small portion are actual structure fires, which is a struck 4, but either be a residential or a multifamily dwelling fire. The very small one is transfer. That's 1%. That's whether the company in Riverdale was actually transferred to another company, which rarely ever happens. We're actually moving resources on a regular basis to surround your community regularly. So that's how we ensure adequate coverage. And just like I said, we're monitoring this 24 hours a day. The person that does that for us is one of our duty chiefs that's on shift. We have 4 of them. They're on duty 24 hours a day. They are constantly monitoring this. And they make adjustments on a regular basis and based on call demand and need every day. And it can be different and in different areas. So we make adjustments regularly and we monitor that and we monitor performance. And as we do that, we always assess on a regular basis to make sure we're meeting those adequate needs. Any questions on anything that I cover, just explaining some of the operational stuff? I know it's a lot, but I want to make sure that people understand it and maybe have a better appreciation of how we're providing services to the community.
Is this the end of the presentation? Because I'd like to hold questions and comments from the council until the presentation is completed.
It is. This is Chief Green. This is it. This is all we're presenting today, and we're available
Okay.
for questions.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Council members, do you have questions or comments on the presentations we've received so far this evening?
Mayor.
Councilmember Enyang, go ahead.
I'll try to, I'm going to ask all my questions to give others chances, but I wanted to be, can we go back to the slide that talks about how many people in the Riverdale house is active? I guess, is it the total member is 16 people, but
Slide
16
1.
that are,
I'm sorry,
Yes.
slide 2. Right, there you go.
okay, so 16 members are eligible, 9, but 9 are ineligible. What is the minimum required number of members at a particular time in order to run a call?
White, I'll let you answer that a little bit. There's no minimum number, sir. Like, we don't have a rule of thumb, but we have best practices. When we look at 100% volunteer corporations, we know the amount of members present on an active operational roster that's needed to be able to staff a station 24 hours a day. And this is obviously not sufficient. Chief White, can you talk a little bit about best practices when we look at Station 9 or Station 33 as some comparators?
Yes, ma'am. So typically, to put a unit in service, we talked about it earlier, is you need at least 2 people to put the ambulance in service. You would need at least 3 people who are qualified on both the engine and the ambulance who can put either one. We call it a first out rule. So basically, if they have 3 people on the floor who are eligible to ride both units, whichever one gets a call first, they can go out on. So in comparison, you look at Bladensburg, which is Bladensburg and Hyattsville. They're your 2 closest heavily volunteer stations. Chief McCullen, Hyattsville is staffed on the daytime, but also heavily volunteer from 3 o'clock a.m. till 7 a.m. 3 o'clock p.m. to 7 a.m. the next day. Hyattsville has roughly between 70, 80 volunteers active that are eligible to ride, and almost the same for Bladensburg. They're more in the 50, 60 range of volunteers that they have that are eligible to ride. And that eligibility is on different levels of training. So it's not a catch-all for every single station.
Okay, so it's several magnitudes more than the 7 eligible members at the moment, even though you only need, say, 2 or 3, if they all happen to be there at the same time, could do some calls.
Yes.
Okay. I'll hold for there. I'll give others a chance.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Foe, go ahead.
Yes, I don't know who specifically I'm directing this question to. I was just I saw that we had an ambulance out and then a replacement ambulance is out as well. Out of service. Do we have any
Chief
idea?
White, can you talk a little bit about that? Yep, that's
And I'm
want
just
to know
wondering
when
if
it's going to
there's
come back
any-
in service.
Yes,
Yep.
that's it.
So
Okay, Chief
so
White.
yes, ma'am. So the Riverdale Fire Department has an ambulance that it owns. That unit has been out of service, unfortunately, a little over a year now because it blew an engine earlier last year. So working with them, the county, whenever an ambulance is out, the county puts a reserve unit in service at that station. So there is a reserve ambulance there at the station. So that way, the service, when they do have a crew, that ambulance can still go out and respond to calls. So it's there, but it's out of service because of staffing. But the unit is available if somebody is there. Correct.
Additional council questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Yang, go ahead.
I'm really first appreciate the pulling this information together. It's really helpful to kind of get a sense of not just sort of one. I think I was concerned about, is our town covered in case of an emergency, but it's clear that Bladensburg and Hyattsville, amongst others, are sort of like carrying the coverage in this area. And so I don't necessarily, at least my first question of concern of, are we covered in the sense of emergency, seems to be required. But my question is around, since there was so much talk about the moving of resources as needed, I'm curious if there's a sense of what is the impact of the Riverdale Volunteer Department not sort of participating in this larger ecosystem. Is there like additional concerns or strain that's happening across the county as a result of this, or is the lack of a department sort of not felt in the grand scheme of things?
So I think that's a great question, and it kind of leads me to kind of a shift in mindset as we look at what our department looks like now in 2024. So we have not had career staffing in Riverdale for more than 10 years or more. And we've seen a decline in volunteer participation rapidly since COVID in various stations. And unfortunately, some of our corporations who have not had the recruitment mechanisms in place have suffered from this. And now we see a lot of our smaller organizations like Riverdale with only having a handful of members, 20, some less than that. The other station 13, right around the corner from there, has even less than that. What I want to offer as a reassurance is that the way our system is set up, again, when we decided to come out of that particular station, we looked at the data and we knew that the location of our surrounding stations and the reliability of our systems, we knew we had overlapping coverage and we could cover this community. Ideally, in the perfect world, we'd like that station to be fully staffed. Absolutely. Would we like them to have robust membership as similar to Hyattsville and Bladensburg? Absolutely. But if I'm 100% truthful, when they do have a crew in service, both engine and ambulance, it's a supplement to what we already have in place. And it does reduce some of the impact on some of our other companies. But when they don't have service and they don't have coverage, we know we can cover it. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but as a department, we are planning for them not to have service more than we're planning for them to have it. We are providing them with all the recruitment and retention efforts and funding that we can. We're supporting them in any effort that we can. Unfortunately, they're not the only corporation that is having these challenges. And as an organization, as a county, we've had to look at our coverage for the entire county, and we've had to reallocate our career resources in addition to beefing up the amount of career firefighters that we now have. And we're putting a lot of effort into that to make sure that we can 100% staff our department in the event that our volunteers can no longer supplement us. So I hope I'm answering the question as best as I can. We are supportive of Riverdale Volunteer Fire Department, but we do understand the realities of what our data is showing us and what their membership is currently looking like. And again, we do see this, and we see kind of the history unfolding in front of us.
Thank you.
Any additional council questions or comments? Are there any comments or questions from members of the public? Mr. Town Manager, I'll give you a chance a little bit later. Wanted to give the members of the public first chance. And I have more than a few questions myself also. I try to let the council and the public go first. As I said, I have quite a few questions and comments. On one of the slides, you said that there's a new process of purchasing a new engine, and yet the ambulance has been out of service for, as you say, over a year, and an ambulance being out of service, you say that the backup ambulance, the reserve ambulance, has been available for 24, nominally available for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since the station-owned ambulance has been out of service. Is that correct?
That's correct. We put a reserve ambulance in the station available for their use whenever they needed it, while we were working through the repairs of their primary unit.
Okay, and you said something about the repairs, major repairs at least, being done, but there were minor repairs. Do you have any more details on that?
I didn't come prepared with that. I can provide the council a detailed report of that once I talk to our apparatus maintenance director. If you're comfortable with that, I want to provide you with accurate information, even a timeline of some of the concerns. A blown engine isn't something very small. I'm sure they're looking at the feasibility of a full replacement versus a repair of the engine. I'm sure those are some of the factors. But I would like to provide this council with accurate data, and I can do that before the end of the week.
Okay, very much interested in that. The issue, I also trying to understand the issue of moving companies, because it sounds like, for instance, you might actually move staff and equipment from Bowie to be temporarily short-term stationed at the Bunker Hill station and to deploy from there. Is that correct? Is that my understanding of that correct?
I think you heard a little bit from Chief McClellan as we talked about staffing reallocation and what we do on a daily basis. Just to give you a kind of a quick overview, our duty chiefs, one of their primary responsibilities is to ensure coverage throughout our entire county. We've deployed several different software mechanisms and just straight data. And at any given time, we move resources from an area in the county that's having less impact on calls to an area that may have a high impact on calls based on that peak time. So at times we have moved resources from, for example, Baden area in the southern side of our county to Bowie, because Bowie has an influx of calls during that time frame. So we do that all day. It's a deployment strategy that every fire department uses. And that's what Chief McClellan was explaining that we do on a daily basis.
And so if you're moving someone from Baden to Bowie, which is quite a drive.
Yes, it was just an example.
Sure, I
I'm not saying we're doing that every day. Yes.
I understand, but I'm just saying that what you're doing there is if the buoy station gets a call and their backup ability to respond has dropped, that's when you reallocate from Baden so that there is a opportunity for someone to respond quickly as needed from buoy. Is that
Yes,
correct?
so that is partially correct. So that's one strategy. The other strategy is that we use peak time calls. So we know, looking at our data, we know when our influx of calls will come. For example, generally our peak time, I think Chief McClellan talked about that, could be during the height of rush hour, during the middle of the day, an early Saturday morning. So we know that in some of our urban areas, some of our areas where we have high call volume, we may have more calls in that area. So we can deploy a unit ahead of time. From an area that has a low data, or our data shows us that they have a low volume calls during this particular time, we can move them and deploy them based on what history has shown us and what our software is telling us. So there's two deployment mechanisms. One is real time, where we see an area that has a gap and we can move a unit up. And the other is using analysis and data analysis to move them ahead of time before the gap even occurs.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And it sounds pretty sophisticated. Which
It's complex.
which sort of brings me to my next question. The most critical calls for a quick response. So the ALS calls, and I believe you said Rescue 7 was a car accident where someone was trapped inside the car.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the calls, if you have stub toe, and to a certain extent, I would say that structure fires need a pretty fast response time as well. But the
Agreed.
structure fires that were mentioned in your stats sounded like some of them were just that it was investigative, that there was a apparent structure fire that might not have been, so perhaps not as important. So has the response time for those time critical calls changed over the last, I'm just going to say, let's go back, go ahead and go back to the 10 years, from which was about the time that career staff were taken from the Riverdale station. So have those response times changed over that time period?
I'm going to let Chief McClellan jump in because I'm sure he may have looked at some response time data today. What I will say to you is I'm not sure 10 years ago, we're comparing the data from 10 years ago when we were there in the station around the clock there. But I can tell you that we look at the response time, performance times for each individual station daily and sometimes by the hour to make sure that we're meeting those marks and those times. There are several things that can affect that. Sometimes our units are on the air, sometimes they don't. Status en route at times, and sometimes we have to do some investigation in there. But I will tell you that we use our performance response times as our standard, and we try to meet that 90% of the time to make sure that we're arriving on our calls timely. Chief McClellan, I'll let you jump in real quick, and if you've already reviewed the data, and you could talk about that.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great question. Just to be comparative, I don't have the exact numbers of what Riverdale ran 10 years ago. But I could tell you the call volume is dramatically different, where in just 5 years ago, maybe our call volume every day was around maybe 3, low 400s. We're now averaging in the high 500-600 calls a day call volume. That's pretty high. That's an average of maybe 20 calls an hour, even during what we called our peak times. So our peak times are basically from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's when we see a rise in our calls. We actually even know certain days that are busier than others, like our Wednesdays between those peak hours is a pretty busy day compared to the other days of the week. If you ask me why, I don't know. Maybe people like Wednesdays, but that's one of our days that seems to be one of our busiest days. Based on that, we're looking at what gets us in a reasonable time. We want to make sure that the units get there quickly. We do that by a couple things. I talked about moving the units to ensure adequate response time. We're also using AVL, which is a GPS location of the apparatus where it is. We're sending the appropriate units. And then we're also tracking on our end, we're also tracking the performance. And what are we really looking at? The moment a call is dispatched, we're looking at 2 times. We're looking at the first one, which is the turnout time for the company. So once they receive the call, whether it's an ambulance call, ALS call, BLS call, a rescue call, or structure fire, they have a certain set of time to be out on the street moving. The vehicle is responding to that call. That's called the turnout time. So for our fire calls, we're supposed to be averaging about 80 seconds turnout time, and then our 60 seconds for our EMS calls. Now, obviously, there's an NFPA standard for our standard response time. And when we had an actual study just done recently by a group called the Finch Group, they noticed that some of our response times to meet that standard, the National Capital Region doesn't meet that. And that's around like 5 minutes and 40 seconds for structure fires and so forth. We don't meet those in a sense, 100 or 90 percentile. So the national average, or for the NCR, the acceptable time frames around 7 to 9 minutes to getting units there. So we set a goal of a travel time of 8 minutes. So taking that turnout time in that 8 minutes allows us to track how we're performing and getting the units there. We're tracking that on a regular basis, and we're doing that pretty good in the Riverdale area. And we're normally getting ambulance and fire trucks to these different types of calls rather quickly, especially in a reasonable time. And when we know those units are already committed to calls, we're bringing resources to backfill to ensure we maintain that service delivery on those times. So between the companies 1 and 9 on your structure fires, you're looking at basically a 4 minute and 30-second response time. Your EMS calls, you're probably averaging between 5 to 6 minutes, depending on the ALS calls. Your BLS calls could be a little long. Like I mentioned, the BLS 1, BLS zeros. Remember, on our BLS zeros, we proceed. So you may get a longer time past that 8 minute, just based on traffic and so forth, because they're not going lights and sirens. But they're getting there within a reasonable amount of time, nothing crazy or so forth. And then our BLS ones, where they actually are responding, they're getting there in an acceptable time to below the 8 minute mark. And I'm hoping that answered your question.
It answered a lot of my questions. I mean, one of the things you said is that you have a goal of 90% on time. And as I remember, the slide went by pretty quickly, but the Rescue 7, I believe we had 17 calls for Rescue 7 in this calendar year so far. And so that means that 2 of them would have been late, showed up beyond your 9 minute goal. Is that correct?
So, yes, let me go back. So your Rescue 7, which is a car accident with entrapment, you had 27 calls, which is 12% for that. That also takes into account how quickly we get other resources. So one of the resources that may be coming a distance of away is the rescue squad, which is the unit with the jaws of life and all that stuff. So they could be committed on other calls, or they're coming back from another call. Normally getting the first responder unit, which is like a fire truck, an engine, or an ambulance there, we're getting there in a reasonable time and so forth, just to start initiating care and so forth, which is an important piece. It's just the rest of that is the rescue portion of like getting the rescue squad there and so forth. We don't have a rescue squad in every firehouse. So rescue squad is actually covering a little large portion. So for the Riverdale area, we're highly dependent on the rescue squad in Hyattsville, which just returned to service just a couple months ago for some repairs, as well as Rescue Squad 814, which comes from Berwyn Heights, which not only has one, but they actually have 2 rescue squads. So depending on the location, determines how quickly we get those squads there.
Okay, so there's the part of the response, it's a multi-layered response, and you may have someone on scene within the 7 to 9 minutes, but not have the full everybody that you need for longer than that.
Correct.
And at least in principle, they can do something even if somebody is trapped in there. But still, if you're aiming for 90%, then even in Riverdale Park, then that is then in this calendar year so far, then 3 people would have had someone arriving later than your own established targets.
And just like I said, the 2 closest rescue squads, Rescue Squad 1 and a Rescue Squad 1 coming out of Hyattsville, is the closest rescue squad. They just recently had some major repairs done to the rescue squad. So they just returned to service. And sometimes when those services are out of service, We normally, like we were just talking about the ambulance, we have an ambulance to put in a reserve. It's depending on the reserve status. So if there's not a reserve, we're depending on the next closest unit. And then when we realize that there's a huge gap, we'll start deploying a resource into that area to cover that particular service when we see that.
Okay, but still, it's your target goals are for 90% on time, and you may you're doing your best to meet those, but you said even that the entire National Capital Region is not necessarily meeting those goals, not just
No, yep, absolutely. And we're, again, that's our goal. We strive to do that. There's a lot of factors that's involved in that. But I also think it's good that agencies, especially fire department agencies, have performance metrics so that we have a goal to meet. I think our community deserves that. And we strive to ensure that we can do that by deploying resources in the best way. Part of the reason why, again, that we move units like we move them is to meet our performance metrics and to hold ourselves to a standard. And Chief McClellan is right. Sometimes we don't, whether it's because I don't have a squad that's in service and close to get the full complement of the call, or other times it's because I don't have a unit in service. So we, again, have to move the resources and to try to meet that mark. But it's something that we look at on a daily basis. And this is something, if this is something that this town would like, we could take a deeper dive into Riverdale and kind of see what that looks like over the next 30 days and see if there's drastic areas where we're not meeting that mark. I don't believe there are, but I have no problem doing a deep dive for you.
Okay, I think they might want that. Councilmember
Sure.
Enyang has another question, but I think I'll let him go. I still have some other questions, but I have been talking for a while. So Councilmember Enyang, go ahead.
Well, I think as part of that too, I guess there are obviously a lot of statistics and data that's out in terms of like what the standards are. This 90%, we talked a lot about that. I guess for me, I'm just kind of maybe at a loss of what are there standards for what do you do for a company that just isn't running? Like, I guess for us, it's the issue isn't is service happening not as fast? I mean, we can go in and see what those numbers are, but the elephant in the room is that the company that's closest to us is oftentimes, I think it was 80% of the time, or 80, there was like 80% and almost 90% not running of total hours of the year, not running at all. And so what are the steps? Like, does the county sort of like, is there an evaluation process for individual volunteer departments on whether or not, like, if you don't meet a certain standard, you're no longer a department? Or does that not happen? Because if we have reserve vehicles that are sort of staying in departments, then they may not be running. I guess I'm just curious on like if there's any clarification on, does the county take action after a certain period of time? Are we part of a process that's already ongoing? Can that not be discussed right now?
Exactly. So that's a complex question. I'll try to answer it as best I can in the interest of time. Let me be 100% clear. We don't own the building there. They are a chartered corporation. And so they can continue to volunteer with a very minimal membership. We do have operational policies and procedures that limit the chief officer responsibilities based on membership, that limit their ability to operate without adequate personnel. But I want to be clear, when we came out of that station years ago, the chief at that time ensured coverage for your area, as I hope that you guys have understood that as we've displayed today. So again, anything that they add is a plus for us. It's a supplement. The department is not depending on them to have full staffing, because they have shown over the last 10 years that they have not been able to do that consistently. We are assisting them as much as we can, but they are now an organization that supplements Prince George's County Fire and EMS Department. It is staffed it is covered by the area stations in the particular area around that. And so there is not a mechanism where I can come in and say, you no longer exist because you only have 10 members. What I can do as a chief is offer them the support with recruitment and retention. I can ensure that we restrict some of the operational things that a company that would have more membership would have, obviously, as far as their chief officers are concerned. But there is not a place right now in place where I can come in and say, you guys need to dissolve as a corporation because you only have 10 members. I think there's more on the on your end that we can discuss when we start to have some transparent conversations with the leadership of this corporation, which I think is an offline conversation that we can possibly have about what they're doing with the resources that we're providing them. But again, I don't want to have a conversation without them present. I think that's a conversation that we should schedule and have. I
Thank
want
you.
to give them an opportunity to speak on what they're doing.
Okay, I'm going to try to wrap this up. It's getting late. One thing, and I think we do want to dig in on the data quite hard. I want to understand that. That's something that I sort of do professionally and am interested in. But the thing that concerns me is it sounds like you're focusing on when the call is received by the company, and as far as the residents of the town are concerned, when they pick up the phone and they call 911 and they say someone is having a heart attack or there's an accident that I see and someone is trapped in their car, that is when the clock starts for them. And so I want to make sure we have that, and I'll dig into that in the discussion of the data, but that's what's important to our residents, the people we represent here on the council.
Understood.
So I guess there's two more questions. I had a conversation about fire department staffing with several other mayors in the county. We meet every month. We have various topics that we discuss, and this has been a topic of discussion for the last several months. Something that came up in that, and this is something we've heard from our company, is that apparently the training of EMS training of EMS people takes a lot longer in Prince George's County than it does in our neighboring Montgomery County. Can you address that? Is that real, or is that something that is just
That's
discussion item
absolutely
people
not
are
true.
concerned about?
That's a great question, but it's absolutely not true. The EMS training is standard across the state of Maryland. We don't set those training hours. That is set by our licensing regulation regulating authority, NIMS. We don't set the amount of hours for training. It's set by the state. So I'm not sure where that information is coming from or where the misinformation is coming from, but that is absolutely not true. Chief McClellan was our former chief of training, and I was also a chief of training. So I'll let him jump in unless I'm missing any information to share here, but that's absolutely not true.
Yeah, just like the chief mentioned, EMS training is standardized through the state through MIMS. Believe right now we're averaging a paramedic programs about 4 to 5 months. And they has to also pass a national registry, which is a standardized test for the country for EMT. And then once that, the state of Maryland licenses them. The fire department does not control any of the hours of training and so forth. And that training is actually either provided by us or they're actually providing it at the state training facility. We have one of them in College Park, which is a part of the University of Maryland.
And additionally, to jump on there, Chief White, I want to make sure that I'm 100% clear, because since we're talking about an 100% volunteer organization, which again is Riverdale, I want to make sure that you guys are clear that each year we're offering additional training classes for EMT for our volunteers only each year, and have done that over the last 3 years. Chief White, can you tell us about the past performance rate and the additional class that the fire department is offering just to our volunteers?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we've offered because our partner at Menfrey at the Maryland the training facility in College Park, as Chief McClellan mentioned, had not been able to offer the summer EMT opportunity. The chief had authorized an instructor to teach that class to our volunteers during the summer months, because a lot of our school-based departments like College Park, Morningside, and some of them that had members that joined from other jurisdictions who are getting their Maryland EMT. That pass rate's been, we've been very successful the last 3 years. We've been above 90% in passing, which is above the state average for our companies that participated. This past year, the one that just ended in August of 24, it was 100% pass rate. So it was definitely a good opportunity for our new volunteers coming into the system. And we definitely have also given more time for our volunteers to get EMT. Previous to this last legislative session in early 24, it was only 30 months before a member had to get firefighter 1 and EMT. Because of the length of time to get EMT was increased by the state over the years. The county authorized more time for the volunteers to actually have to obtain that, because we understand that there's a time gap there. So now it's 36 months. So each new volunteer gets 3 years to obtain both firefighter or EMT certification.
Thank you, Chief White.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up, you said that you provided summer EMT classes because University of Maryland was unable to do that. Does
Yes.
that mean that you only start these classes a couple of times a year, 2 or 3 times a year, or?
So we generally do them in the summer because that's when we have our students are out of school, and that's when our volunteers are asking us to do that class. It's a day work class. It's a shortened class. It runs basically June to August. Traditionally, an EMT class is running in the evening for our volunteers. It may take anywhere from 6 months to 8 months. This is a condensed, shortened class that's running every single day, Monday through Friday. That's when we had the instructor available, and that's when our volunteers wanted us to offer that class during the summer.
Okay. I may want to follow up on that, but I
Sure.
think again it's getting late, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock.
Sure.
And then I guess my last question, and then I'll let the town manager ask his questions or make his comments. This has all been a little bit unusual for me when I first moved to the area, because where I grew up in Central Texas, in the city of Austin, then there were no volunteer departments. It was entirely professional, entirely career firefighters in there. And one of my childhood friends, after he and I sort of drifted apart, became a spokesman for the city fire department. And so I'd see him on the news periodically, and my family would report when I moved out of the area that he was still doing that and still working on that. So I guess my big question is, what is up with the county career staffing? Because it seems like it is always heading down. Is this just a funding issue within the county budget? What's going on there?
Okay, so just again, for the essence of time here, to be as quick as possible, it's a complex issue. We have evolved as an organization and have grown through the years. We have expanded into new stations, and as you've seen, 50 years ago, actually more than that, we incorporated all of our volunteer corporations into one county fire department. Each individual municipality had their own department. At that time, the volunteers again were strong, were managing the majority of their stations. They own the majority of the assets. And now we have over 45 stations to staff with career staffing, and trying to keep up with that pace. Each year we are adding to our complement of career firefighters in each budget cycle. And we had just gotten to a point with, especially during COVID, where we were losing at one point 20 to 30 a year during COVID, nationwide, actually, not just us. We reached a point where we just couldn't keep up with the amount that we were losing versus the amount that we were keeping. Just as a quick history, the history of the fire service is traditionally men and women in the fire service do 20 years. That's kind of what we were accustomed to. Now we have people who are doing 10 years, 5 years, not reaching their 20. And as a department, kind of even as a fire service, we were depending on those long-term personnel staying that full tenure. We now see that that's not the case. So we're now kind of just redeploying how we attract a newer generation in the fire service. This year, I'm grateful for our council and our county executive. We have to hire 150 firefighters in 1 year. That's the most that we've ever hired in the history of Prince George's County Fire and EMS. When I look at my neighboring jurisdictions, the District of Columbia started a class of 70. They're charged with hiring 120 this year. Anne Arundel Fire Department just graduated a class of 75. That's unheard of, because they're dealing with the same things that we're dealing with, keeping up with a growing fire service that is now more career dependent and less volunteer dependent. So that's really what it is. It's just keeping up with that, dealing with coming out of COVID and catching up with the attrition and the amount that we've lost and just keeping up with those demands. So what you'll see from us as our primary focus this year is an aggressive recruitment campaign. We just started a class in June of 50 firefighters. We started a class in September, a little under 20. We're starting another class of a little under 20 in December, and then a large class in March and April, 55 and 60. It's just a non-stop cycle for the fire department as it relates to hiring. And again, we can have more offline conversations to kind of show you some of the data and what we actually need. But on an average day, I am starting my day down 26 to 27 firefighters a day. That's before sick leave, annual leave, IOJ, FMLA, all of those things. So I'm feeling that with overtime. And then when you take into account just injuries and people leaving, that can be somewhere between 30 to 40 holes a day for a fire department. That's one of 4 shifts. That's really what the message is. That was the reason for the reallocation of firefighters. And at the end of the day, we don't have enough bodies to fill 45 fire stations. And that's just where we are. So we are reallocating to make sure that we're strategically placed to cover our department and our county, and making sure that, again, we're aggressively hiring. We're making sure our hiring packages are sustainable and competitive. We just recently raised our entry-level entry-level salary to be competitive in the region. We're making sure our recruitment and retention efforts are diverse. I'm not sure if you saw our Metro ads, we're on Metro buses, we're on the media, we're everywhere. So that's what we're doing to attract more firefighters and to make sure we have enough firefighters to fill the vacancies and to meet our needs as we grow as an organization.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think we need to
Yes.
continue to have some pretty detailed conversations
Absolutely.
about what's going on.
Thank you
Mr.
for
Town
having us.
Manager, you've been very patient. I appreciate that. Please go ahead if you still have questions.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, you covered some of my questions. Chief, I want to thank you for coming and bringing your deputies. I will follow up with you offline with my questions and share the responses with the council.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Green, Chief McClelland, and Assistant Chief White. Thank you very much for being here and for talking to us this evening. Appreciate it. Oh, I guess before I let you go, are there any other questions from anyone? Okay, looks like everybody's brains are full. So thank you very much. Appreciate you coming this evening to speak with us. Okay. Next on the agenda, I have some proclamations, and I need to find them in my stack of documents because my Zoom window is too small. Starting out with Small Business Saturday. So, as usual, I'll do it in English and in Spanish. Whereas the town of Riverdale Park celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. And whereas, according to the U.S. Small Business Administration, there are 33.2 million small businesses in the United States. Small businesses represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees. Small businesses are responsible for 62.7% of net new jobs created since 1995. And small businesses employ 46.4% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. And whereas 68 cents of every dollar spent at a small business in the United States stays in the local community, and every dollar spent at a small business creates an additional 48 cents in local business activity as a result of employees and local businesses purchasing local goods and services. And whereas 72% of consumers reported that Small Business Saturday 2023 made them want to shop and dine at small, independently owned retailers and restaurants all year long. And whereas the town of Riverdale Park supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday, now therefore I, Alan K. Thompson, Mayor of the town of Riverdale Park, do hereby proclaim November 30th, 2024 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and to shop small throughout the year. Y ahora en español. Just notice we have the new seal on these proclamations. That's fantastic. Proclamación. Considerando que la ciudad de River Park celebra nuestras pequeñas empresas locales y las contribuciones que hacen a nuestra economía y comunidad local, y considerando que, según la Administración de Pequeñas Empresas de Estados Unidos, hay 33,2 millones de pequeñas empresas en los Estados Unidos, las pequeñas empresas representan el 99,7% de las empresas con empleados remunerados. Las pequeñas empresas son responsables del 62,7% de los nuevos empleos netos creados por 1995 y las pequeñas empresas emplean al 46,4% de los empleados del sector privado en Estados Unidos y considerando que 68 centavos de cada dólar gastado en una pequeña empresa en los Estados Unidos permanece en la comunidad local y cada dólar gastado en pequeñas empresas crea 48 centavos adicionales en la actividad empresarial local como resultado de que los empleados y las empresas locales compren bienes y servicios locales. Y considerando que el 72% de los consumidores informaron que el sábado de las pequeñas empresas 2023 le hizo querer comprar y cenar en pequeños minoristas y restaurantes de propiedad independiente durante todo el año. Y considerando que la ciudad de River Park apoya a nuestras empresas locales que crean empleos, impulsan nuestra economía local y preservan nuestras comunidades, y considerando que grupos de defensa, así como de organizaciones públicas, privadas y privadas de todo el país, han respaldado el sábado después del Día de Acción de Gracias como el sábado de las pequeñas empresas, ahora, por lo tanto, yo, Alan K. Thompson, alcalde de la ciudad de River Park, por la presente proclamo el 30 de noviembre de 2024 como Sábado de Pequeñas Empresas. Estamos a los residentes de nuestra comunidad y las comunidades de todo el país a que apoyen a las pequeñas empresas comerciantes el Sábado de Pequeñas Empresas y a que compren en pequeñas empresas durante todo el año. Muchas gracias. Okay, next presentation is Municipal Government Works. Finding that on my stack of presentations here. Okay, that's small businesses again. Here we go. The Mayor Proclamation. The Mayor and Town Council of the Town of Riverdale Park proclaimed November to be Municipal Government Works Month, whereas the Town of Riverdale Park was incorporated in 1920, and whereas Maryland is home to 157 other municipalities, and whereas municipal government represents the most responsive level of government, allowing citizens to have direct access to elected officials, and whereas in an effort to educate citizens about municipal government and the importance of their participation, the Town of Riverdale Park is proud to promote municipal government awareness, and whereas municipalities have enhanced the quality of life for their respective residents, maintaining natural and historic sites and structures, and helping to make Maryland a great place to live, work, play, and explore. Therefore, be it proclaimed that the Mayor and Council of the Town of Riverdale Park hereby join the Maryland Municipal League in declaring November to be Municipal Government Works Month in Riverdale Park. Y ahora en español. El alcalde y el consejo de la ciudad de Riverdale Park proclaman noviembre ser mes de trabajos de gobierno municipal, mientras que la ciudad de Riverdale Park fue incorporada en 1920 y mientras que Maryland es el hogar de 157 otros municipios, considerando que el gobierno municipal representa el nivel más sensible del gobierno, permitiendo que los ciudadanos tengan acceso directo a los electos, y considerando que es un esfuerzo para educar a los ciudadanos sobre el gobierno municipal y la importancia de su participación, la ciudad de Riverdale Park está orgulloso de promover la conciencia del gobierno municipal. Y mientras que los municipios han mejorado la calidad de vida de sus respectivos residentes, mantenido sitios y estructuras naturales y históricas, y ayudando a hacer de Maryland un lugar bueno de vivir, trabajar, jugar y explorar. Por lo tanto, se proclamaron que el alcalde y el consejo de la ciudad de River Park, por unirse a la Liga Municipal de Maryland, en declarar noviembre para ser mes de obras gobierno municipal en la ciudad de River Park. Muchas gracias. And proclamation number 3 before my voice gives out. Whereas in 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a bill proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day and called upon Americans everywhere to rededicate themselves to the cause of peace. And whereas President Eisenhower also issued a presidential order directing the head of the Veterans Administration to form a Veterans Day National Committee to organize and oversee the national observance of Veterans Day. And whereas each year the Veterans Day National Committee releases an official poster with a theme for Veterans Day, and the theme for Veterans Day 2024 is a legacy of loyalty and service. And whereas the sacrifices of those who serve and have served in the armed forces and their families has been vital in maintaining our freedoms and way of life. And whereas veterans are brave and selfless individuals who willingly put themselves in harm's way to defend the lives and liberty of others. And whereas veterans make significant contributions to the community in all phases of our economic, social, cultural, and political life. And whereas the town of Riverdale Park honors veterans and will honor and recognize our veterans on November 11th at 11 a.m. with a special ceremony. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town of Riverdale Park Mayor and Council do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2024 as Veterans Day and call on everyone in our community to recognize and honor Veterans Day with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Y ahora en español, proclamación. Considerando que en 1954 el presidente Dwight D. Eisenhower firmó un proyecto de ley que proclamaba el 11 de noviembre como el Día de los Veteranos, pedía a los estadounidenses de todo el mundo que volvieran a dedicarse a la causa de la paz. Y por cuanto el presidente Eisenhower también emitió una orden presidencial ordenando al jefe de la Administración de Veteranos que forme un comité del Nacional del Día de los Veteranos para organizar y supervisar la observancia nacional del Día de los Veteranos. Y considerando que cada año el Comité Nacional del Día de los Veteranos publica una cartel oficial con un tema para el Día de los Veteranos, y el tema para el Día de los Veteranos 2024 es un legado de lealtad y servicio. Y considerando que los sacrificios de quienes sirven y han servido en las Fuerzas Armadas y sus familias han sido vitales para mantener nuestras libertades y nuestra forma de vida. Y considerando que los veteranos son personas valientes y desinteresadas que voluntariamente se ponen en peligro para defender las vidas y la libertad de los demás. Y considerando que los veteranos hacen contribuciones significativas a la comunidad en todas las fases de nuestra vida económica, social, cultural y política. Y por cuanto la ciudad de River Park honra a los veteranos y reconocerá y honrará a nuestros veteranos el 11 de noviembre a las 11 de la mañana con una ceremonia especial. Ahora, por lo tanto, se resuelve que el alcalde y el consejo de la ciudad de River Park proclaman el 11 de noviembre de 2024 como el Día de los Veteranos. Hacen un llamado a todos en nuestra comunidad para reconocer y honrar el Día de los Veteranos con programas, ceremonias y actividades apropiadas. Muchas gracias. Thank you all. I appreciate the service of all veterans immensely. So I will be happy to see all of you at Veterans Day. Okay. That brings us on the agenda to the mayor's report. So I get to keep speaking. And I need to find my notes. I will not be speaking too much. They're underneath my notes from the fire department. As I mentioned earlier, Councilmember Smith is out this evening. He contacted me. He had a back injury, and he says that the pain meds are making him not able to participate particularly well this evening, and muscle relaxants, so he will not be joining us. I mentioned this last week that many things are looking good for COVID. The infection rates, the hospitalization rates are low. There's been the wastewater rates seem to be low. Everything is very good. The only downside is that I myself was diagnosed 2 weeks as being COVID positive, and I have been isolating from my family and from other members of the community quite religiously since that time. I was extremely ill the first day. I knew I was coming down with it. I tested positive at 8:30 in the morning, and I fortunately was able to secure antivirals, Paxlovid, and start taking them at about 4:30 in the afternoon. And my symptoms had been getting progressively worse during the course of that day. At around 10 or 10:30 at night, then I was starting to make decisions about at what time I would call an ambulance for myself. Hence some of my questions to the fire department, wanting to know what the response times were. So at that time, the antivirals kicked in, and I started getting better, and I have been relatively low symptom since that time. I was quite ill for the 2 days after that, still recovering for a few days, and since that time I've had little to no symptoms. But I have also spent thousands of dollars, or my insurance company has, on those antivirals, so it's not been zero impact. This is with me being as careful as I can be. This is with me, and as everyone knows, I am very careful. But even my defenses can get through. And I just want to encourage and remind everyone that it's a disease. It can be a very bad disease. I've known several people in the last few months who have gotten this, who have not gotten it previously, who have been seriously ill. Take as many precautions as you can. Make sure that you are in well-ventilated places when you are with people who are plausibly ill, and be safe. It's still a bad disease. We don't know what the next variant is going to serve up. It's not guaranteed to continue getting better. And so please keep that in mind and try to limit transmission. Moving on from COVID, sorry, I spent a little extra time there because as a matter of fact, I still tested positive just yesterday. And I don't know what direction my own illness will be going over the next few days. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, this month marks the 1-year anniversary on November 20th of the tragic and, according to the state's attorney, preventable deaths of Sky Souza and Shalom Mba. And my heart goes out to their families, and I want the families to know, and the members of the community, their friends, to know that I think about them constantly, every day, and am always working to find things to prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future. And I join with Councilmember Smith, who's not here this evening, remarks he made in the last few meetings that we need to take drastic actions to improve pedestrian safety and prevent tragedies such as this from happening again. As was mentioned in the proclamation, Veterans Day is next Monday, and somehow between now and then, I will take the time to write remarks, and I hope to see a large turnout on Veterans Day. And I may solicit input from veterans who are present at the ceremony to say a few words as well. So please do show up. It's very important. I will be there, rain or shine, if I am able to walk the 3 blocks to get to the monument, and I will present the remarks there. So please be there. I hope to see a very large turnout. Before I wrap up my report, I will mention, for those of you who may not have been paying attention, that tomorrow is an election, and it's an election where the state of Maryland will choose its next senator. The country, one of our senators, the country will choose the next president. And there are important other races for judges, for county council special election. There are ballot questions also. There's a constitutional amendment, state constitutional amendment that's on the ballot. Always important. And tomorrow, before 24 hours have elapsed, will be your last time to be able to vote if you have not already voted. I took advantage of early voting last week, voted on, I believe, Tuesday evening. And that ended on Thursday evening. And so tomorrow is really the last chance. If you haven't voted, please get out and vote. Democracy works best when many people vote. And I hope you will all of you who have not, who are hearing these words, will get out and vote and make what may be some hard decisions for many of you on questions. I was able to vote carefully and thoughtfully and without too much difficulty. And I hope that many of you, if you are having difficulties and have held off voting until now, will make those decisions and vote. Thank you. That concludes my remarks for this evening. Next item on the agenda, giving me a chance to catch my breath, is the Town Manager's report. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll be as brief as I can, but I have a fairly lengthy list. So first, staff are working on a CIP project regarding sidewalks on 48th. The timing is such that we may require a special meeting before the end of November to award a contract so we can move forward. We have some funding deadlines, and we really need to get the sidewalk in by the end of the year. So we're working on that. As soon as we have clarity, we'll contact the council by email. There is a walk this Wednesday at 3 o'clock, coordinated by Hyattsville. We learned about the possibility of this last week. Today we received an invitation. It's somewhat different than our initial understanding, but Senator Washington will be joining some elected officials and staff from Hyattsville. Director Lewis will be representing the town, and then if there's any elected officials that would be able to attend at that time, we understand that likely conflicts with your full-time work. But they're going to gather at the Old Sun Trust building by the McDonald's there on 410, and then walk up East-West Highway to 43rd Avenue in Hyattsville. That was the site of a fatal accident. And they're going to also have a SHA district engineer there to talk about modifications to a turn lane on East-West Highway. So if anybody is able to attend, if you could let Director Barnes know, and we'll get you more information on that. We're pleased to share with the council we've hired the part-time events coordinator. Andrea Barber joined our team last week, and we're excited to have her on board. Town Hall and DPW operations will be closed on Monday, November 11th, in observance of Veterans Day. There will also be no change to the trash, yard waste, and recycling collection on that Monday. The mayor mentioned that there may be rain on Veterans Day. If the rain is severe, staff are looking to maybe some slight modification to the planned event. Mr. Mayor, if there is any recommended change, we'll coordinate with you, sir. Leaf vacuuming will begin November 11th. We are working on a zone schedule, and we'll be publishing something later this week. There's the kickoff, the holiday season with Small Business Saturday event from 4 to 7 p.m. on the 30th. We have a rain date for that kickoff the holiday event, and that rain date is December 20. Passion and Compassion Ministries will hold their annual holiday food basket distribution on November 15th. 12 p.m. on Tanglewood Drive. And the town contributed, the mayor and council had approved in the budget, $5,500 to the event. The farmers market during Thanksgiving week was being moved to Tuesday. It's known as Turkey Tuesday. And so that's November 26th from 3 to 6 p.m. And Town Hall and DPW operations will be closed the 28th and 29th in observance of Thanksgiving. December 3rd is District 22 Legislative Dinner. And that's from, according to the invitation sent out by Greenbelt, from 5 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Greenbelt American Legion Post. And Mr. Mayor, I imagine we'll be talking more about that tomorrow. Ms. Barnes will assist in coordinating RSVPs. Just a reminder that the town will be collecting new and unwrapped, meaning no wrapping paper, toys for the annual toy drive for families at Riverdale Elementary School. Toys can be dropped off at the town's police department or during the holiday event on November 30th. And town staff are coordinating with Riverdale Elementary School directly. And we're also partnering with Riverdale Elementary School with a holiday shopping, matching up police officers with students. And that's to occur on December the 11th. And that's all I have this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is monthly finance reports.
Deputy Director Jones.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight's finance report is for October fiscal year 2025. It is a revenue and expenditure comparison for the months of August, September, October, and then we have a year-to-date total. So for the month of October, fiscal year 2025, we have a revenue total of $3,294,573, with expenditures totaling $956,592, with a revenue net expenditure total of $2,337,981. I would like to make a point of emphasis about the expenditures for October. The $956,000, it is higher than fiscal year 24 and 23. The month of October had 3 pay periods, so that's why the October expenditures are a little bit higher than they were in the previous 2 fiscal years. So for the year-to-date total, we have a revenue amount of $5,442,314, which makes up about 49% of what was budgeted. For fiscal year 2025 expenditures, the total is $2,924,802. And we have a revenue net expenditure total of $2,517,512. So I did cover the revenue more extensively in the previous meeting, but I'd like to make a note about fiscal year 2023. The reason why 23 was higher is we had received more of the real estate tax revenue. And this was due to the timing of when the county actually issued the real estate tax bills for that particular fiscal year. So while revenue is higher for the current fiscal year, we are still just at 49% of the budgeted amount in comparison to fiscal year 2024. Looks like we're up considerably for revenue, but if we compare it, budget to budget, we're roughly the same as where we were in the previous fiscal year. And yeah, that concludes the finance reports for October fiscal year 2025. If there are any additional questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Council, any questions?
I have none.
Okay. Usually, Councilmember Lingua and I are the ones grilling you about details, but you've learned to anticipate many of our questions, and I appreciate that. If there's no discussion, may I have well, are there any questions from members of the public about the finance report? Okay. May I please have a motion to adopt the monthly finance report subject to audit?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion by Councilmember Lingua, seconded by Councilmember Foe. Is there any discussion? Are there any public questions or comments? I will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith is absent. Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
and I abstain. The motion passes 3-0. Correspondence summary was removed from the agenda. Was there a fire department report, staff?
No, sir.
Okay. I wasn't sure what the status was there. Council committee and ward reports. Councilmember Foe, you're up first.
Due to the lateness of the meeting, Mr. Mayor, I'll withhold my report this meeting, and give it in my next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lingua.
I think I will follow suit.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingua. Councilmember Inyang.
Just glad to hear that the events coordinator has been hired. I think that it's a great addition and evolution for the town. So looking forward to connecting the community with that person. And then I know there were a lot of conversations that came up in the conversation with the county fire department, and so that I've had a couple follow-ups, a couple questions from residents about just in general. So looking forward to following up with additional questions, whatever makes the most sense. I can reach out to the town manager and gather some thoughts, but appreciate the work that went into getting the entire leadership team here. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Inyang. That brings us to public comments. Someone earlier had a public comment, Mr. Rodriguez, I believe. Did you still have a question or comment? Doesn't seem to be there. Alfredo Rodriguez, you had a question or comment earlier. Do you still have that question? You can bring it up now during public comments.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, hello. So the questions I have was in regards to the project out here in the 5400 of Jefferson Street. As far as speed humps, I don't know if it's not related to what you guys have going on, but we are in desperate need of a couple of speed humps on the street, and I have advised, I believe, Jessica Barnes and Miss Ivy Lewis, and we do not have like anything for sure as of now, because I've seen the speed humps everywhere in the city of Riverdale, but this street, and we desperately need it. So I want to know if there's like any possible ways or what needs to be done in order for us to get those placed over here. Hello?
Mr. Town Manager, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Rodriguez. My name's John. I'm the town manager, and both Ivy and Jessica are on my team. What I'd like to do is for us to have a follow-up conversation with you. We have engineers who are currently evaluating 54th Avenue, and so we'll reach out and we'll have a further discussion with you about your concerns. And we'll talk with engineers, the traffic engineers, about speeding on Jefferson and what they recommend as the best course of action. And then we can report back to the mayor and council. Mr. Mayor, is that approach okay with you, sir?
Yeah, that seems fine. I mean, I'll say, Mr. Rodriguez, that your council member, Councilmember Kalan, who is not here this evening, has been very focused on lowering speeding on 54th, but he has mentioned Jefferson, at least to me, a few times, and so we are aware of it, and we will try to do our best to address it as quickly as we can. But we need to, as the town manager said, we can reach out to you and your neighbors to have a discussion and start this process.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for being patient as we went through this long discussion with the county fire department.
Not a problem. I'm going to start assisting to this meetings because I'm usually kind of laid back when it comes to the discussions of the town of Riverdale City. So I will try to be more proactive when it comes to it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
Are there additional public comments or to be had this evening? Okay, let's move on. Next item is consent agenda. There are 3 items on there. As is our rule, I take a motion to approve the consent agenda, and there is no discussion of any of the items, just a simply straight up and down vote. Will you please have a motion to approve consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second.
I'm going to give the second to Councilmember Enyang and the motion to Councilmember Foe. And I will now do roll call vote. Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Enyang.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 3-0. That brings us to our legislative action items. Item number 1 is a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-OR-10 regarding Chapter 72 Riverdale Park Legacy Mixed Use Town Center Local Design Review Committee. May I please have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Lingua to adopt ordinance 2024-OR-10 regarding Chapter 72 Riverdale Park Legacy Mixed Use Town Center Local Design Review Committee. Would you like to speak to this, or we're going to have a staff report on describing the legislation? Let's go with staff.
Mr. Chelton?
Sure, yes, I can speak to this again. So as we discussed at the last meeting, this update to Chapter 72 is mainly a housekeeping item. There's some terms that were changed, for example, from mixed use town center to legacy mixed use town center and things of that nature, some clarifying items, as well as some typos that the mayor was kind enough to help us find at the last meeting. So those items have been addressed in the new ordinance. And yeah, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Is there any council discussion of the motion to adopt ordinance 2024-OR-10? This is basically a housekeeping ordinance. It's to align our own laws with the county changes in the county law. And so there's not much exciting here to discuss. Any public comments? Hearing none, I will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Enyang.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 3-0. Next item on the agenda is a motion to authorize the town manager to sign a task order contract with Mead and Hunt for engineering services for the Lafayette Streetlight Project, Streetlight Improvements CIP number 21 PW03, for an amount not to exceed $76,962. May I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Lingua to authorize the town manager to sign a task order contract with Mead and Hunt for engineering services for the Lafayette Streetlight Project for an amount not to exceed $76,962. Is there any council discussion of this motion? Are there
I have
any
nothing to
public, are there any public comments? This was discussed at length at the work session, and this is a long planned project, and this will be the engineering services, and the construction will come as a later contract. Any comments at all before we move on to a vote? Seeing none, I will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Enyang,
Aye.
and because 4 votes are required on financial matters, and I also vote aye, the motion passes 4-0. Next item on the agenda, item 3, motion to authorize the town manager to sign a task order contract with Pannoni for engineering services for the fiscal year 2025 road improvement projects for an amount not to exceed $134,378. May I please have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Enyang. Can we have a very brief staff report on what this covers?
Director Lewis?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Actually, this issue was before the body last week as well. List of road improvement projects for fiscal year 2025. Engineer Kim Adams identified a list of 10 projects. At that time, we were missing cost estimates for 3 of them. Since that time, the contractor has updated the estimated cost of the full list of projects to be $579,177, together with the engineering cost of $134,378. The total cost of engineering and construction is expected to be $713,555. The total budget is $784,157, taking into account the budget for streets and sidewalks and curb ramps. The engineer will design the project, inspect the work upon completion, and review and approve invoices. And we anticipate that the projects will be completed before the end of 2025. We will use one of the on-call construction companies to install the improvements. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Is there council discussion of this motion? Hearing none, Councilmember Lingua?
So essentially, to be clear, what was presented last week are those items that are going to be addressed.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So essentially, the items that were presented last week by Pannoni are those items that are going to be addressed. No addition.
Actually, plus those submitted by several members of the Walk Bike Drive Safety Committee and from residents through the new safety email address. And Director Barnes, can you pull up the list or go to page 2 of the staff report? So these are the projects. It's 1 through 10. You scroll down a little further. Thank you.
Do you have any additional questions, Councilmember Lingua?
No.
Okay.
No. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I know it's a bit obvious, but I found over the years it's good to ask obvious questions.
Indeed it is. Any additional council discussion of this motion to authorize the town manager to sign the task order contract with Pannoni? Are there public comments or questions? again, most of the work of discussing this happened at the work session. I think we went on for half an hour, 45 minutes about the various projects. So think we're ready to take it to a vote now. So I will go to a vote. Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
and because it's a financial matter, requires 4 affirmative votes, I will also vote aye. The motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, motion to approve street closure of Natoli Place from Queensbury Road to Lafayette Avenue at the Veterans Monument from 9 a.m. to 12 noon on November 11th, 2024 for the annual Veterans Day ceremony. May I please have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Lingua. This is an action that is required to be taken by the council to close a street for an event, and this is an important event to honor our veterans, and so appreciate that this is on the agenda this evening. Is there a council discussion of the motion? Are there any public comments? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
and I abstain. The motion passes 3-0. The last legislative action item is a motion to authorize the town manager to close the town center parking lot either on November 30th, 2024, or on December 20th, 2024, the inclement weather date, from 12 p.m., which is 12 noon, to 10 p.m. for the holiday season kickoff event. May you please have such a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, I'll let Councilmember Lingua have it. Councilmember Foe has been making all the motions this evening. So Councilmember Lingua, seconded by Councilmember Foe. This is again, the town council has to take action to close roads, and this is the town center parking lot, and the planned date is November 30th, but as the town manager mentioned earlier, it may rain, the weather may be inclement, and so there's a makeup date of December 20th. And only one of those, of course, will it actually be closed on, hence the sort of funny language of the motion. Is there council discussion of the motion?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Lingua, go ahead.
As when we do consider street closings, which are for very worthy reasons, this one especially so.
Thank you for those comments, sir. Any additional council discussion? Any public comments? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 3-0. Next, we move on to unfinished business. First one is ordinance 2024-OR-09 regarding town elections. Can we have a staff discussion of this item?
Dr. Barnes.
Good evening, I'm Mayor Thompson, members of the council and the community. The ordinance and the item following, which is the charter amendment we just talked about during the public hearing, both pieces of legislation would work together to make adjustments to the town election timeline and provide for early voting. The only item to point out is the very minor change in language to specify the actual day that the candidate filing deadline that would occur. We discussed this at the work session. There was no concerns or opposition to to the proposed language. So that will be included in the legislation when it is adopted at the next meeting, at the special legislative meeting at the end of the month. Of course, if one piece of legislation doesn't pass, that means the other one also doesn't pass. So they move together as companion pieces of legislation.
Thank you, Director Barnes. And just in case someone was not watching the meeting last week and is curious about it, there were some sort of coupled issues. So the first question that came up was what 65 days before the first Monday in May was, and I did some that. I think that came up at perhaps the October legislative session. And I determined that that would be every year on a Saturday night, and having petitions due on a Saturday night didn't seem to make sense. And so my first suggestion was that we change that to 67, so it would again go to being accepted on a Thursday evening, which has been the traditional day for delivery of petitions. But upon reading the legislation in whole, I realized that the town council can decide to have early voting that starts on any day. So rather than starting on a Monday, then it could start on a Saturday, it could start on a Thursday. And that would again have us with an unpredictable day of the week for delivery of petitions. And so rather than have that unpredictability, we just said you start from the first day of voting, whether that's special early voting or whether that's the regular voting day. If there is no early voting, count back 65 days and go to the Thursday that is furthest from that from the first day of voting, but closest to that 65-day mark. And the language in the legislation reflects that. So that's a complicated story. Okay, we don't have a motion this evening. This is just discussing the legislation. So is there additional council discussion of this ordinance? Councilmember Lingua.
I'm glad you figured it out that way, because I would hate for us to have to turn to phases of the moon.
Agreed. That would not be ideal. Any additional council discussion? Any public comments or questions? Okay, let's move on then to the next item of unfinished business, which is highly related. Charter Amendment Resolution 2024-CR-CR1 regarding Article 5 nominations and elections. And again, this is reflects the same issues as the ordinance, and is similarly modified from the initial draft that was presented. Is there any council discussion of this piece of legislation? Are there any public comments about this piece of legislation?
So to be clear here, if I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We're looking at a special legislative in the later part of.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And the reason for the special is because we have two clocks that we are paying attention to, and one of them is the time between introduction of a charter amendment and when it can be adopted. And then there is the time of effectiveness of a piece of an ordinance. And the two of those all have to be completely wrapped up by the time that the new legislation says we want to be ready for so we can be ready for the election in the spring. And so that's the need for the special legislative.
Okay. If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Senior member on this council, I say to all the other members of the council, present or not, you have been notified, you have been forewarned.
Very good. Is there any additional council discussion or public comments or questions about this item? Very good. Let's move on to unfinished business. Item 3, council discussion on county state legislative priorities.
And here's where I would typically say Director Barnes, but I'm going to have a little introductory comment, Mr. Mayor. We're just going to need some direction from the council, whether it's this evening or between now and the work session at the end of the month, because we will be working with the city of Greenbelt to put together the PowerPoint presentation, and that they haven't given me a cutoff date, but I imagine it will be several days before December 3rd. So we will need direction from you all in terms of what you would like to see included.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Director Barnes, are you going to discuss the individual items?
Certainly, I'll just give a brief overview of the joint priorities. Well, most of the list is what we talked about last year, and we've added a couple of items at the end of the list to reflect what was discussed at the work session. So the top portion of the list were joint priorities, and if I remember correctly, they came from a kind of a hot list of topics that the mayors had discussed as potential joint priorities. The second category was proposed legislative priorities. It sounded like the automated stop sign enforcement had already been addressed, so we just took that off of the list. But we did not get the change to the transportation article, so that remained on the list as a potential consideration for this year. And then the bond initiatives are still very important projects, and we did not receive bond funding during the last General Assembly session. So staff are seeking direction from the mayor and council whether you wanted to continue with these bond requests or add new ones or make changes. But those are still important and relevant projects that we did not receive funding for in the last General Assembly session. The two items discussed, we talked about housing at the last meeting, and I'd have to check real quick. Director Charlton, can you scroll down to page 2? I forgot the second topic that we had discussed a little bit further down. Oh yes, improving pedestrian access to the Purple Line stations, which was discussed during the PLCC walk and ride. I think it was 2 Saturdays ago. So that was a topic of discussion, potentially a bond bill to be considered.
The item of housing was nominally affordable housing, and how to create incentives such that the supply of affordable housing will go up.
Correct.
And so that, and I believe that was included under the joint priorities. And so it may be that if we have something specific that we want to suggest there were some suggestions. There's some legislation, I believe, in last spring's session that proposed to sort of force the county from a state level to implement some items in the zoning ordinances that each county has, and so that's an option that we could have. I think we've discussed many times on the council the thoughts that we have about so-called accessory dwelling units, where someone can put up a small housing unit on their property. Sometimes these are called mother-in-law cottages, and so there's a question of those are not allowed in the current zoning ordinance, at least not very easily. And so the question is, could the state twist the arm of the county and require the county to implement a form of that in the county zoning ordinance? I know that there are members of the county council who are very interested in this, and there are some other members of the county council who are not. And so that's just a possible legislative priority. Any additional discussion of these priorities? Any guidance that we can provide to staff for preparing a presentation?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. Oh, please
Go ahead. Who wants to go first? Want to flip for it, or
He can take. He said I'll defer, or I'll go first.
I think he said he'll defer.
First, so you get to go first.
All right, I'll be quick. I think the improvement, the pedestrian access to the Purple Line stations, I definitely think it's a worthwhile conversation. I think it's obviously top of mind with the community walk this Wednesday along East West Highway. I think it's kind of part of a larger conversation with the Purple Line neighborhood revitalization connectivity project. And so I think it's at least for that one station on East West Highway, it's sort of like connected the idea of, the closest people who live to that station being unable to access that station is, I think, like a fundamental problem. And so I think that the situations are tied closely together. And my second question was just around it's only bond initiatives, I guess, is like the only potential buckets that we have for things that we're not sort of sharing with other municipalities. There's no other I don't know. I don't even know what the options are, but I'm assuming it's bond funding and that's it. Those are
the bond bills are it's pretty difficult to get other money added in. And to be honest, the state is not looking very happily at new spending. The state's finances are not in great shape. But there are bills that that are periodically introduced that make funding available through other state programs. So, for instance, Senator Washington was able to pass a bill that increased the availability of stormwater funding, particularly for communities that have been on the short end of the stick for stormwater spending and for having to suffer from environmental consequences of decisions upstream of them. And we definitely qualify for that. So he was able to do that, but that was creation of a program and not actually sending money directly to us. So we can apply to that program and we can get funding from that program, but it's not a direct transfer of funds to us. And so that's an option, is that we could suggest a program, but and it could even be suggesting a multi-year, perhaps like a 5-year program of funding infrastructure improvement along the Purple Line corridor. That could be a possible piece of legislation.
Yeah, I'd be in support of that.
Okay, so maybe we can add, Mr. Town Manager, we can add that to the list, have staff work on something in that direction.
We will, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just take a few minutes and discuss something that I learned recently, and I've been trying to figure out whether this deserves to be a piece of legislation or not. And it has to do with, this is really, I'm quite nerdy really about this sort of thing. So this has to do with the fact that when the federal government started building highways back in the early to mid 20th century, then they found that people were unable to drive at the full engineered speed because the stripes told their little internal senses that they were driving too fast, and so they would drive slower. And so when the interstate highway system was put together, then they had standards for how long the stripes would be and how they would be spaced so that people would be willing to drive at 50 or 60 or 70 miles an hour on these roads that were designed for traffic like that. And I found out that those standards sort of started dribbling into smaller local roads. And so that leads people to drive faster on those smaller roads than probably they should. And so I haven't investigated this, but there's a question in my mind of what length are the stripes and what is their spacing on East-West Highway, and is that really appropriate in the sort of neighborhood that we live in? And so I'm thinking that perhaps legislatively, the state legislature could weigh in and create zones that have certain densities of people living there, and change these standards for how the state would honestly just put paint down on East-West Highway for us, and in order to slow traffic down just passively. No speed cameras, no enforcement. It's just that people would tend to drive slower because their visual field was seeing things that were moving faster than they thought was appropriate, and they would slow down. So, interesting little idea. Think about it.
Are we discussing or?
Sure.
That's interesting. I know that I haven't thought of the length of the stripes on roadways, but I do think there is sort of like there's a feeling of, when a road feels like a highway, and I'm always shocked when it's like, oh wow, the speed limit's only 25 here, like it's 5 or 6 lanes. There's no mediums. I look at like Route 1 and some of the work that's been done to like, the road diet there. And I think Kenilworth Avenue, that's on the list of some of the stuff that's going to be looked at. And so having, incorporating that into some of this existing work that's happening, I think that's definitely a worthwhile thing, especially if there's evidence behind to support that. I would just hope that we don't get we made the lengths of your stripes longer, and so therefore East-West Highway is done, and that's the last that we'll get. But I think everything possible to sort of further remove the highway feel to certain roads, like especially Kenilworth, East-West Highway, Route 1, I think is definitely net positive, in combination with a bunch of things that the experts have talked about is good for passively or actively forcing people to reduce speeds.
Yeah, I heard a podcast about this, and it was fascinating. They just discussed how they had come up with these standards, and about the fact that they had, as I said, migrated from interstates where they're probably fine to be at that spacing down to much smaller local roads. And they discussed the fact that a lot of suburban landscaping design was picking up items from this as well. So moving street trees away. So street trees are good for slowing people down. They again provide feedback that says, whoa, I'm moving fast because there's this tree that's close to me. And if instead you move the street trees further back, you don't have the planting strip that we have in most of the town, and people feel more comfortable driving faster on those, purely residential roads. So interesting to study sort of the history of engineering and design, and see if maybe we can turn some of that around and get back to a more reasonable place. Councilmember Lingua?
Yes, sir.
Questions or comments or thoughts?
Well, I've noticed Route 1 now in College Park, especially in the areas where they've been investing a substantial amount of time and energy into the roadscape, be that for the Purple Line or just be it for the fact that they're Gosh, what would be the term? Boulevarding a state highway, what is technically designated as a state highway. In the sense that it has a much more urban feel to it. And part of that has been with the roadscape as well. So yes, I think that is something that would be worth looking at, be that for East-West Highway, Kenilworth, even be that probably folks in College Park might be amenable to this too, River Road as well. That's my thought on that. I did want to touch on a point regarding what you had brought up about the auxiliary buildings on properties. One concern I have about that is in allowing that is that something that is seen there as, you know, an additional revenue maker for that property owner, or is that essentially being able to house other family members as well, as you're saying, a mother-in-law or something like that? To the degree that it's possible to enact and enforce statutes on consanguinity, which can be hard to do. My concern about that also is, as we see now, just with properties that have single buildings on them, the number of cars that we have being parked either in driveways or on the street. And if adding such structures onto properties already by an adjustment zoning, is that just going to exacerbate that issue? It's my concern with that.
Okay. Well, you know, I've discussed with many people that you know, there's good things and bad things that come with every change, and so this you know, the council as a whole needs to come to a decision about whether to advocate for that particular method of addressing the affordable housing shortage, and that's a decision for the council after consideration.
Well, I think there's also we've heard over the years being planned in terms of the TDOZs that Park and Planning and County have worked to designate to bring more housing to an area. I think really that's where a fair amount of the affordable housing dialogue needs to occur, especially be it around, you know, WMATA stations or now, you know, MTA stations, be it Purple Line, and elsewhere where they have light rail. That's where I think a fair amount of that discussion needs to occur as part of a way to address the issue of there being a shortage of affordable housing. Tied in with that is the dialogue with the state through MTA, as well as the county, to the extent that they have any authority and responsibility towards this, as well as the liability. In terms of addressing, as is, I think what's been listed in here, I saw read that the paragraph on there on connectivity, as well as what the PLCC is advocating, is something that I think any jurisdiction along the Purple Line would want to see, is what was being advocated by the PLCC, that being, you know, a pedestrian walkways that will encourage use of the Purple Line, in the sense that they have setbacks and they're set up in ways that people feel safe going to and from a station, be that from work or home.
Okay. Mr. Town Manager, do you think you've received enough guidance for this tonight and are willing to accept some more from the council outside of the meeting?
I think so. And Director Barnes and I will meet tomorrow and listen to the direction and flesh it out a little bit. So we'll be able to present back to you all at the end of the month.
Okay. I'll discuss with you tomorrow night some of the ideas I have about the stripes and so on. There might be a better way to put it, a more general way to put it than just that. Okay, any additional council discussion of this item?
Yeah, I would just like to say that, you know, if council has any questions about what, you know, that I brought up, please feel free to call.
Okay. Are there any public comments on the item of council priorities for county state legislation? Okay.
Can I throw up a pie in the sky?
Sure.
Towards the county, for them to seriously reconsider a overhaul of their department's permits, inspection, and enforcement.
That's the moonshot, all right. Do you have any specific suggestions?
Greater consistency and clarity for a applicant to know exactly what steps are required and at what time, from start to finish on a process, on a permitting process, so that they can more accurately budget their time and their resources in a way that's efficient and economic from their standpoint.
Okay, let me work with staff and see if we can come up with some language for proposed. I think you're probably aware that there are a lot of municipalities who share our collective frustration with the DPI process, and so let's see if I can come up with some language that can perhaps address the problems they have.
Yeah, we keep hearing, and as of late, we have experienced what many in this county have occur to them as they go through a process through DPI. Be that a homeowner, be that a business, be that a nonprofit, be that a municipal government, in terms of what inspections are required, when, and what they cover, and then finding later on in a process that something is not as it was supposed to be, unlike they were told before, and then thus causes delay, causes extra expense on the part of the applicant, and it is really more counterproductive towards the goal that the county has in terms of bringing economic development to the area.
Mm-hmm.
When people are going through a permitting process that does not have clarity and certainty from start to finish, in terms of what they need to do.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lingua. Mr. Town Manager, your hand is up.
I would say ditto. As the mayor knows, I reached out to County Council Member Olson this afternoon, seeking his office's assistance in dealing with a determination by DPI on one of our projects that we designed under the rules that have been published. But now there's new rules in process, and they're talking about applying these new rules to us, which means we have to scrap our old design, and it's just unacceptable. So I don't know how we address that at the District 22 meeting, but in general, I think now that the town's doing more projects than we have historically, this is really impacting our timelines and how we're expending both our residents' monies as well as grant funds, and there has to be some concrete steps taken by the county to fix the issues at DPI.
Mm-hmm. And those grants very often have spending deadlines where the project has to be completed. And so, yeah, it's a problem.
And those grants are essentially other people's other public monies.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay. Any additional items on this for this topic of unfinished business council discussion on county state legislative priorities from council or members of the public? Councilmember Inyang. Go ahead, Councilmember Lingua, you still have the floor.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of, this isn't something that we really bring up at District 22. Other than the fact, if we were to tell District 22, we're going to be bringing this up to the county. And that's really about it. And if they care to pay attention, great. If they don't, we understand. But I think this is more something that we're approaching with members on the county council, be that the, District Council Member Olson, be that any of the other district council members who have a sympathetic ear, as well as any of the at-large, as well as the office of the county executive. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, maybe we should have a legislative dinner for the county.
As long as we don't have to fight first. Fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Councilmember Inyang, you had something else?
Yeah, just the I think definitely concur with what's been said. I've had my issues with just event planning and the fact that it's kind of built into the existing building permit process and all the like weird quirks around that. What I've been told from the county was we are updating our systems and like our technology is going to be different pending like very soon, and that should like make things easier. So I think if any conversation would just be to push to be like, this isn't just a technology issue, which it is. There are issues, but that's not the only thing. And so I think a county-wide dinner might make sense if we can pull permits in order to have that happen, if that's possible. But I think a conversation on there's both process plus technology plus like depending on the person you get, the day of the week, like some of those changes too, just make it really hard to plan accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at the, I guess we're pretty close to the end of the agenda. So any other items to discuss under unfinished business item number 3? Are we ready to move on? Are there any other items of unfinished business that were not on the agenda? Are there any items of new business? If there are none, may I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Inyang to adjourn. This motion is neither debated nor discussed by the rules of order. Move immediately to a roll call vote. Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 3-0. We are adjourned at 10:12 p.m. Thank you all very much for a
Good evening.
lively meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.